the Overman Warrior Podcast.
By the Daily Caller, a rotating green light was seen by multiple people last week. The sheriff's office said they didn't receive any calls about the light, and no one has debunked the sightings, at least not yet. All right, Robbie.
Part of a whole chain of sightings in Ohio. I guess this is the answer to my whole, why do they always show up in the desert in the middle of nowhere? I mean, Ohio is also the middle of nowhere, to be clear. Sorry, I'm from Michigan.
Okay, Michigan. Okay, so first of all, not only do I want to defend Ohio because my family is from there, without outing any specific member of my family, I can corroborate there was some family lore about a UFO sighting out of
Really?
in the 1970s in a park in Cleveland. I'll say no more because I don't want to.
Oh, that's where I crashed in my ship when I came to Earth.
But look, no, we had that really great interview with a Harvard scientist last week who was on a boat in the ocean investigating a
Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. All right, now I've referenced this several times. I've talked about it in some videos. You have to go back a couple of years ago. But watching Disclosure Day and seeing all the press that Steven Spielberg did, where he said, I have not had a UFO encounter. I've actually had several of them. And I've had one that was very overt and actually made me mad. And I have to tell the story because I just so happened to have finished writing a book that I'm shopping it around. Now people are interested in the subject, and as I'm shopping this book around, I'm thinking, I wrote all these chapters not really knowing, some of them are pretty wild. And I thought they were too wild for a mainstream audience. Meaning, you put it on the back shelf or it's on the conspiracy theory rack, and I love a lot of those writers. But, I thought a lot of the stuff, not that I think he's great, but David Flynn, those kinds of writers, you kind of, when you're doing these kinds of projects, and I was doing it as a serious scientific project, and as I went through my chapter readings to submit to some of these places I'm submitting it to, I'm reading them thinking, man, these people are going to think this is crazy. Because some of the chapters just way out there as far as what mainstream is willing to accept. I think Disclosure Day makes it mainstream. It's years and years of people sending Steven Spielberg things, their information on UFO lore. And I had a personal UFO encounter. About a year and a half after that encounter, I was at the Point Pleasant Mothman Museum investigating Mothman. I went there for my birthday. It's one of my things. And you can't deal with the Mothman monster or cryptids and not have stories of UFO sightings. And when the Mothman was out all the time, there were UFO sightings galore. If you've ever read John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, made very well into a movie of the same name by Richard Gere. Richard Gere is a big time leftist now, but it's a really good movie. I always enjoyed it. It didn't even come close to dealing with the amount of UFOs that were in John Keel's book, and all the abductees and the UFO encounters. Now, granted, Point Pleasant is in the neighborhood of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and reverse engineering and the Roswell incident and all this stuff, the bodies going there. I think we're at a point now where congressional testimony and people who have retired from the Air Force, I know a few, and they've been enough tongue-in-cheeky about all their activities that I think that yes, there are bodies, right, Pat, and they've been studying reverse engineering a lot of the technology. I know enough on the inside to know that that's very much a deal, a thing. But I felt sorry for Steven Spielberg when he said that all these people have sent him all these things over the years because he's made all these great movies. E.T., Close Encounters. I consider Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull to be a good movie. A lot of people think that's crazy. I think it's the dumbest Indiana Jones movie, but I thought it was very sophisticated because it dealt with the idea of ultra-terrestrials. And I remember reading reviewers who were shocked at ultra-terrestrials. They didn't know what they were. So what's a being that exists between dimensions? What's that all about? And you got these 25-year-old snot-nosed reporters that just got out of English major colleges, and they get a job at a paper, and they're trying to do a review for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I thought was a very serious movie. They used the character of Indiana Jones to talk about early alien disclosure efforts. In a lot of ways, that movie, Crystal Skull, opened the door for Eric von Daniken's Ancient Aliens efforts. If the Ancient Aliens producers took the von Daniken books and said, let's go Zechariah Ascension and von Daniken to the next level and put it in video, make a series out of it, let's see what happens. I think Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, popular character of Indiana Jones, gave moral license to think about UFOs differently. Think of aliens as coming as archaeologists, as scientists, not coming here, but to study us. And in the act of that, they had an imprint on our society. It's an interesting concept. And the UFO at the end of the movie is hidden in plain sight, and it disappeared. And when you start dealing with a lot of Peruvian lore from South America, they have there's a lot of UFO stuff going on. I talk about ayahuasca experiences all the time. There's a lot of UFOs in ayahuasca recipients, people who take it and witness lots of snakes and lots of UFOs. So very interesting. Snake in the garden, the root of all evil kind of stuff. That's why snakes appear in ayahuasca visions. I spend a whole chapter talking about that in my book, The Politics of Heaven. But one thing I do need to talk about that's very specific to me is, unlike Steven Spielberg, I have had a UFO encounter. And it's not the way you think. It's not like you're out in the middle of a lonely field somewhere and it came and abducted you and raped you like fire in the sky or something like that. My UFO encounter was where I was actually, well, I'll give you a for instance. I said, a couple of years ago, I said this about the danger of government having information over people, that they're more dangerous than the aliens. Here's what I said. And all that type of thing, to just discard it. But with that in mind, I've often said that if an alien craft landed right there, I would not be surprised. I'd go about my day just like if it was a van full of immigrant workers getting ready to show up to a job site. I'd just, there they are, and that's what they're doing, and okay, because it wouldn't surprise me one bit. This whole idea of disclosure, and there's going to be a revolution of thought if we start interacting with the technology of these alien species. We've been doing it all along. I don't think it's that big of a jump to consider that there's been associations at the level of government that has been seeking supernatural aid in the form of technology that comes from other places and not domestically on planet Earth. So I don't build my life around the idea that there's going to be through disclosure, there's going to be this big change state. I think it's always been with us since the dawn of civilization. I think civilization sprung up out of some of these interactions, and I think history, the more we learn and cover it, the more we can confirm that. UFOs start making more sense. You start saying, well, if they can't figure out that, they certainly can't figure out this. But when you start seeing that the government starts using UFOs as a way to say, you give us more government power. We need more power to protect you from them. But you don't know anything about them because we're keeping you from having that access to the information, because the information is power, and it's really flimsy, phony power that they're after. They want to convince you that it's something only they know about, and that you need to give them all the resources available to fight that thing, which only they know about, because you're supposed to trust them implicitly, which is the scam. That's why the whole UFO debate, and when they start getting in trouble, and government gets in trouble over the lies they've been telling people, and they build their entire existence off those lies for the acquisition of power, because they've sold lies and their ability to interpret those lies as their power base. And then, of course, you're going to have scrutiny and people not feeling very well about things. And the desperation is quite obvious if you've been tracking this stuff for a long time. Because that UFOs aren't new. They've been in the news for as long as humans have observed things happening in the sky or in their world. And the more you uncover, the more good archaeology that's done, and the more questions that are asked about the origins of all civilizations. I was explaining this too the other day. Why are ancient temples and all these ancient religions worth studying? Why are they so exciting? Why do we get a thrill when we start thinking about analyzing ancient cultures? It's always interesting to see how ancient cultures dealt with problems and how their social structure evolved around beliefs. But what was the cause of those beliefs? What did they observe before they had mass media, for instance? And when you're you're in the middle of nowhere and you're trying to build a culture that can have a stable society, well, what do you, how do you, what value system do you bring into it? And often these temples are the representations of their religious order and what their needs for sacrifice. And then a few days after I recorded that statement where I dared a UFO to appear, then this appeared in the sky.
Multiple viewers reach out to us after they say they spotted those rotating green lights in the sky. Now, Caden Little of Middletown reached out, and he tells us he saw the lights around 10:30 or 11 last night. And take a look at this video he sent us. You can see a ring of bright green lights rotating in the sky.
Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. So, a little ironic, a little bit of a different kind of story today. There was a UFO sighting over what they say Middletown, but specifically, it was at a very precise location. So, the UFO was right up, there's a speedway over there. This is Butler Tech, right over here. And there was a UFO hovering in the sky with lights turning counterclockwise right here. And then it jetted off in that direction very fast, far more rapidly than any physics could allow. It was very obvious, very tangible. Multiple people saw it. And it goes along with this what I've been talking about, this rash of UFO sightings. And what's ironic is this is close to a location that I had just previously, a few days before, filmed and said I would not treat a UFO if it landed right over here. Actually, we'll walk over there in a minute. I pointed to a spot and said if a UFO landed there, I wouldn't pay it much mind, because the article that I was doing was about government using the UFO incidents as a distraction from many of the crimes that have been committed. We have a government here that's been caught with bad things with COVID, bad COVID policy. Many people died because of it. You have election fraud, inflation, payoffs to government officials through bribery from other nations. There's a lot of treasonous, seditious acts that have been going on. And of course, the government would love to not have the news cycle. And so always the shiny penny of UFO stories comes up. And then here one happened exactly where I had been daring one to appear just a few days after I did it. So I think there's a lot of shenanigans going on there. And is it targeted to me because I said so and someone saw the video and wanted to make it happen? This provokes, again, it was a very, it wasn't a blurry photograph. It wasn't some kind of, it was a tangible asset floating in the sky right there. Defined lights, everything you'd see, almost photographable for like a science fiction movie. And it occurred right where I had just been talking about a UFO if it landed in that spot, which is where I do some of these talks every now and then by the Butler Tech campus. This isn't off of some remote location. This was there for everybody to see it. So it was a very obvious landing. This comes a few weeks after when I was talking about UFOs. I was talking about the Las Vegas landing where apparently there was some 10-foot aliens in the backyard people's homes, and they believed it, whether or not it's true or not. There's I warn everybody that there's a lot of technology out there, and if a government wants to fake something like that, they certainly could. I also have said, someone asked me the other day, so you do all these serious things, but you talk about UFOs. Because UFOs, I think, are unidentified flying objects. I think there's more going on to the world. It's not just our national politics. I think there's politics that go on throughout all the history of civilization. I think there's a lot more to people than what we tend to think. Our only real history is through religious practice. And I think if you go back and you look at comparative religion and you study the religions of the world, not in every case, but when you're talking about a spiritual alignment, I think a lot of the types of activities that people describe in religious experiences are very similar to UFO experiences and abductions, and the physical interaction with mysterious paranormal objects. And the way governments have stayed in control is they've denied that those things exist, or they try to be the brokers between those happenings and normal people's lives, and that's a way that they can maintain some sort of terrestrial control. So given the nature of people, and especially after what we witnessed with COVID, flat out lies by government, especially with the vaccine push, and all out atrocity of authority to force vaccine mandates, experimental drugs, think what you want about it, but we just went through a major catastrophe that was largely induced by government and government's interaction, and a whole unholy alliance with corporations. So to have a level head about that, why do these people think they can get away with it? Well, I mean, you study UFO behavior. I've been to Roswell, studied Roswell. So I took that experience as an insult. I know, because I'm very politically active, that I'm watched. By nature, I'm probably one of the most surveilled people that there is out there. All my social media, of course. And this didn't happen just yesterday. I've always had an anti-drug posture. And this goes back to when we lived in a previous neighborhood in Mason, Ohio. Lots of police and authorities and mayors were involved. But I got involved in a drug ring. I was against it, trying to stop the sale of drugs in my neighborhood. And the FBI was involved. There was a rapist that ran around. It became the subject matter of a book I wrote called The Symposium of Justice. So it's not some crazy wild conspiracy I have that I'm heavily watched. The FBI was at our house interviewing my wife a lot. And that carried over with us for decades. We're definitely on all there's a bulletin board with pictures of the local wild ones. We're on it. We've been on it for years. So when I'm sure when I did the video daring, saying that the three-letter agencies, and at the time Biden was in the White House, so there was a lot of all the MAGA types were being heavily chastised and attacked for all kinds of ways. And I do a lot of serious topics on politics, and the fear. I don't have the fear, but people who deal with me are like, all right, he's out there talking about school levies and money and investments in children's health and public school issues, and I'm a big-time politician. Do I want to take a picture next to this guy? Because when's he going to turn around and talk about Bigfoot or some aliens? And then he's going to make us look stupid, right? So there's that element. So that's always, with me, it's always been in the background. So here my statement on, and there was a bunch of UFO discussions at the time, and there had just been a sighting in Las Vegas of some aliens that had been cloaking themselves and got caught in the backyard, and they got caught on film. And I was talking about whether they were fake or not. And I was saying that the government agencies, just as they showed in Disclosure Day, how CIA types can get into buying control on people and manipulate them, that definitely is a thing that happens. So all these UFO reports, I said, were to cover up the problems the Biden administration had and their complicity in the COVID cover-up. Because that COVID was still a big story. We're still coming out of it. People were just now taking the masks off when this UFO appeared. So I was very critical of COVID. I was very critical of Amy Acton in Ohio. I was very critical of the Biden administration. I was definitely an election person. And it would be, if the technology existed, which I knew it did, then they could easily hoax up a video and make you sound like a complete lunatic. So I put these videos out. I did my video, which I showed, and I dared one to show up, and it did. Almost in the same exact spot I called it to do it. Not a coincidence at all. Very weird. I mean, all the possible places a UFO could have appeared, one that defined appeared. And I argued after it happened, I took it as not that little green men or UFOs like in Disclosure Day. It is possible. I do think that occult rituals, and when you go out there and proudly proclaim, and especially if they're watching you anyway, if something, they being whatever authority is in charge, when we say they, it could be aliens, it could be three-letter agencies that are working off black budgets, it could be anything. If they're watching you anyway, and you say, hey, I dare a UFO to land right here, I wouldn't have any problem going up and I'd offer them a job. It's what I think I said. If some aliens landed, I would give them applications to go work somewhere. I would try to hire them, because if they work that hard to get to Earth, they might be hard workers in business, and they might make good employees. I think that's where I was going with all that. So in other words, I said the aliens aren't what you have to worry about. It's not the aliens in your backyard in Las Vegas that get caught on camera. It's the government conspiracy that's trying to cover it up without having any accountability to the public through voters. That's more dangerous than the aliens. So that was my premise on it. And then a couple days later, that video showed up and lots of people saw it. It wasn't just me. I wasn't there at the time, but it showed up where I dared it to show up. And I felt that it was a message to me. It was an answer to my video, and I figured it was from the government types that were like wanting to dig into my conspiracy theory, like, oh my gosh, it actually came true, in order to turn me into the Richard Dreyfuss character from Close Encounters and have me start throwing dirt into my living room. I think that's what the intent was by those people. They could have made that UFO with a projection that they have out there. Prior to the drone shows you see these days, it moved off way too fast to be a drone. But it could have been a projection that blasted its holographic sound signature across a cloudy area like a hologram, and it could have created a 3D looking object from the ground. People got out of their cars at this stoplight right from where I filmed my response to it, and actually got out of their phones and filmed the thing. It's been on the internet for years. It's called the Middletown UFO. Look it up for yourself. Monroe, Ohio, Middletown, Butler County, Ohio, Westchester. They've seen kind of the same UFO patterns. We're, again, very close to, in that area, I say we, being the region I live in, very close to Wright Pat. So if you're going up with some experimental aircraft or anti-gravity technology of some kind, you could easily just take off from the airfield and be in Point Pleasant in like 10 minutes, where all the UFO sightings were found for the Mothman prophecies. Or near my house or near Middletown. But I took it because of the proximity and location, I took it as a response to me. And I think, through occult practices, you can go out there and, pray to the gods. You can sacrifice maybe your firstborn or a dog or a cat, and these things that watch us are hungry for blood, and maybe that's how you get them to appear in the sky. Maybe they've been doing that for tens of thousands of years, millions of years. We just found out the other day, recently, beginning of June 2026, that we've been building fires for 800,000 years longer than we thought. So there's a lot that we're still uncovering about our human history trajectory and how long we've actually been doing things, and how long can history actually record activity. But I think your biggest archaeological evidence is this alien disclosure bit, that these characters have been coming and going forever, and that I was able to conjure one up, whether it was a government entity responding through some sort of government black budget science to throw an image up there to get me to bite on a hook of conspiracy to defame me in other ways that otherwise I might have a lot of relevancy in political consulting. People might not listen to me because they might think I'm a kook, because I lose my credibility. And if I take the bait on something like that and go crazy over the top, my reaction to it was, oh, okay, so there's a UFO appeared right where I said it would. And did I think it was, oh my gosh, they're watching me, they're looking at my windows every minute of the day? I already assumed that. I don't worry about it. And so UFO appeared. I'm like, oh my gosh, it just happened. I feel so, I feel like a prophet from the Bible. They came and answered my question. I gave them a dare, come down and strike something on fire and bring a miracle. And a miracle happened, so I gained validity and power. No, but it was at that point when that happened, that's when I decided to go write my book, The Politics of Heaven, which is now finished on its first draft. I'm shopping it around a little bit. The feedback I'm getting is, whoa, this is pretty wild stuff. So I came back from my UFO encounter, that UFO encounter that I spoke about, and I'm like, here's the power structure as I see it. I'm going to bring my political experience to these UFO encounters and answer some questions. And as I was leaving the Disclosure Day movie, it was quite obvious to me that my book answered a lot of the questions that people are having coming out of that movie. And they're the kind of questions I had that I wanted answers to after I had my own UFO encounter. Again, did I conjure it up with the dare? What do they watch all of us? And when you say the certain frequency or you say some certain key words, they come and appear. They're looking for you. They were looking for me over Butler County that day. That they caught it on film. Or was it a 3-lettered conspiracy agency out there with a black budget that said, let's make Rich Hoffman look like a nut. Let's respond to his video. That'll really spook him. And that'll blow his credibility in all those political circles that he's so influential in. Which is what I think was the case. So I wrote The Politics of Heaven to explain it away. But was it a UFO encounter? It absolutely was. And there's no dispute. And it was pretty wild, pretty spooky, pretty deliberate. And I think it didn't really hit me until I watched, and that was a couple years ago now, until I watched Disclosure Day. I really just took it as just another thing I go through. Some of the stuff that happened to me are things that would change people's lives forever. And I've gotten to a routine over my many years of near misses and more than coincidences to brushing it off as just another day of living life. But that's my UFO encounter. And yeah, I think what I said was very prophetic. And in context, I referred to it, but I've never put it into like a video sequence like this, where you can see what I said when I said it, what I said, where I pointed, where the UFO actually showed up, and actual clips of the UFO. As I've told this story in the past, I've said, hey, look up Middletown UFO, and you can see it on YouTube. It comes up on the internet. You can find articles about it. UFO enthusiasts have talked about it now for a few years. I didn't really think much of it until I saw Disclosure Day and realized, well, Steven Spielberg just made this really good movie that he considers to be science fact, and he's never even had a UFO experience, and I have. Even though I wasn't on site when it came, I have been on site when it came, and I've witnessed them with my own eyes. But this one's weird because I actually provoked it. I called to the sky and pointed to a place, and within a few hundred feet of that spot, one showed up a couple days later. And just to be anywhere in the world where that happens is a miracle, especially given the proximity of time. That you can't ignore that, and I think it's more relevant than ever. So that's my UFO story. I came away from that wanting answers, so I sat down and wrote The Politics of Heaven. And I think a lot of people who read it are going to get answers to these questions that they have. after watching the movie Disclosure Day and wanting to go to the next layer. That's certainly my UFO encounter inspired me to write the book. That's why I wrote the book, and I wrote it based on I do tell that story in that book, along with other stories of paranormal occurrences. And it always helps to speak with authority on something when you've actually experienced it. And I can say I have. Anyway, it's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.
In the age of disclosure, you must understand the politics of heaven. Coming soon. Coming soon, the politics of heaven in 2027. A treasure hunt through heaven and all human history.